Keywords for episode B: brain architecture, the physical structure of the brain being built through neural connections every day in the classroom through our interactions. Belonging, we are looking at the feeling of being accepted and being part of a group, not just being present. And then lastly, bilingualism, that we are going to unpack a little different by breaking it up into two parts. Are you ready for episode B? Let's go. Brain architecture. This is the physical structure of the brain, the neural networks being formed, especially during 0 to 5 years, when more than 1 million neural connections are being formed every second. Unfortunately, both positive and negative experiences will form neural networks. And the physical structure of the brain changes when a child experiences a positive environment versus a negative environment. So the building blocks will look different when a child is exposed to a positive versus a negative learning experience. And the brain, the neural networks are then also being pruned if the baby or the child is not using them. Why does this matter? Because this is the scientific backbone of why the early years matters and why responding to a child that is crying matters. Why it is important to serve and return. Why is it important to have routines that create a safe environment for children to learn in? Because this also explains the brain architecture and the importance of positive environments around the child and positive stimulation. Why chronic stress during this period is so critical, and why the brain architecture will then look different when a child is experiencing chronic stress versus a child experiencing a loving, caring environment where the child is ready to build those connections and to build those neural pathways. What does it look like in the classroom 0 to 2? Rapid, visible development. You can see it happening right in front of your eyes. New skills, new sounds, new words, understanding of new concepts, literally weekly, sometimes daily. This is a period where there's the highest rate of brain and neural pathways being formed in a child's life. What can you do to support brain architecture in the 0 to 2-year-old classroom? Prioritize responsive serve and return interactions over passive stimulation where you just spend tummy time or you just provide tummy time to the children. Connection is the most important during this age group. Every babble, every gesture, every cry should be answered promptly and warmly and consistently. Treat every single small exchange as a learning opportunity. In the 2 to 3 years, what does it look like in that class or that age group? Rapid language explosion and increased complex play. You can hear them self-talk, you can see them talking to one another, and they are starting to really strengthen the connections. They like repetition to really strengthen those neural pathways so that the pathways are not pruned. And there's a explosion in language, as I said, and then also we can see some functionality developing within the functional areas within the brain. What can you do in the classroom? You need to offer rich, sensory rich experiences, real world language, where you are talking through a routine, where you are talking about what's in a lunchbox, and also a lot of different experiences. They are eager to learn and they are extremely curious. Not what does it look like in the 3 to 5 year old age group? Increasing capacity for planning. We can see a increase in impulse control, and they are able to understand a more complex social understanding. And then also, what can you do in the classroom as an early years teacher to really promote brain architecture? Use scaffolded challenges. Now, that is where the tasks are just beyond the current ability, and that child needs some adult support just to make that jump to the next step, rather than repetition of mastered skills or tasks that are far beyond their reach. This let's call it the just right zone, is where the most architectural work will happen within the brain. This is also known as the next step that we plan for. But the next step should then be just in that just right zone. Our second term, belonging. Now, that is the feeling of being accepted, valued, and included as a genuine member within a group. Some children can be part of a group but still feel that they do not belong. Why does belonging matter in the early years classroom? Belonging underpins a child's willingness to participate, take risks, and engage socially. Children who feel a strong sense of belonging show greater confidence in trying new things and recovering from setbacks and persevering in tasks that they may find challenging, because it is just that safety net that is there for them, because they feel accepted, they feel valued, and they feel included within the learning environment. So we can summarize it by saying that instead of spending energy to feel safe, the child already feels safe and now can use that energy to gain new experiences and to use that energy in learning new skills, forming new relationships, rather than using that energy to feel safe. How does it look in the different age groups? A baby or a young toddler will show comfort and ease in the presence of a familiar adult or familiar peers, and distress, or they will really be upset when they see or they are in an environment where they see unfamiliar adults. What can you do as a 0 to 2 year old teacher to promote belonging? You use consistent greetings, routines, and familiar objects like a comfort item or a consistent seat or spot on the carpet to just create that safety, to build that predictability and that personalized space, that this is my space. This is where I belong. What does it look like in the 2 to 3 year old age group? A toddler seeks out specific peers and adults, and they really show pride when they are being recognized, when people know their name and they call them over to come and play. And they will start to also show protest if they are excluded from a group, or if they feel excluded in a group. They may not have the language to express what they are feeling, but they will show distress. Now, what can you do to promote belonging in the 2 to 3 year old age group? Use individual acknowledgement throughout the day. Use names often. Don't just speak in general. Call out names. Noticing small contributions. William, you helped tidy up the blocks today. Not, wow, you tidied up the blocks today. Use those names so that the child can really experience that they are being seen. specifically seen for what they did and what the contribution to the group was during the day. What does it look like in the 3 to 5 year old age group? The children in this age group is actively navigating peer group dynamics, and they may exclude or be excluded by others from the group, and then increasingly starting to measure their own worth against how peers respond to them. What can you do as a 3 to 5 year old early years teacher? Explicitly teach inclusive language and model it yourself. We have space for one more. Come over and play. And intervene early and calmly during exclusion dynamics when you pick up that they are excluding a friend from the group. Belonging at this stage is really important and often won or lost in small peer group moments. And that's when adults need to pick up on that. And we need to actively watch out for this to really cultivate that sense of belonging. Our third term for today is bilingualism, and that is the ability to understand two languages. To understand how language develops, we need to break it up into receptive language skills and expressive language skills. Receptive language is what a child understands even before the child can use language themselves. Expressive language skills, that's what a child can actually produce and say, the words and the language that a child can say. Now, in bilingual children, these skills often develop unevenly in one language versus the other language and across the languages, in other words. So these skills will develop faster in one language, and it may seem that it develops slower in the other language, but it's because of the receptive part and the expressive part. A child may develop receptive language at the same rate in both languages because they are they are building those files and starting to understand the concepts and the words. They may not yet be able to express it. And then we measure a child's understanding through expressive language. But the child is still developing that language, or for that matter, both languages, through acquiring new language and building those receptive language skills within the language development. So this is really, a child might have a strong receptive language in both a home language and the setting, the language that we use in the setting, but the child may have a stronger output in only one, in other words. And this is typical, and it's not a sign of a language delay. It's because of the development of language that happens first in the receptive and then in the expressive language skills. Why does this matter? This distinction prevents one of the most common misreadings in early years practice, assuming a bilingual child who says little in the setting doesn't have language or doesn't understand. In reality, receptive language regularly runs ahead of expressive language in any child, and even further ahead in bilingual children, building two systems simultaneously, building those two languages and those two streams of new words simultaneously. So practitioners who don't separate these two skills risk underestimating a bilingual child's actual understanding or misidentifying normal bilingual development as a language delay. What does this look like in the 0 to 2 year old age group? A baby may respond to his or her name, receptive language skills, well before the ability to pronounce any words, expressive language skills, and this is totally fine. The gap will be wider or more visible than in bilingual children versus monolingual children. So that is something that we need to be aware of. What strategy can you use to promote or to support the child? Don't wait for expressive language output to think that this is what the child understands. In other words, don't judge the child's expressive ability and say and assume that this is what the child is able to understand. Observe responses rather, responses to instructions, gestures, and familiar phrases in both language as a real evidence of what is being processed, because the child is processing receptive and expressive language. And continue exposing the child to both languages consistently rather than narrowing or zooming in to one to reduce the confusion. And because this is a very common but unsupported concern, it will just take the child longer to process the receptive skills or build those files in the brain because they are building two files simultaneously for paper in one language and paper in another language. What will it look like in the 2 to 3-year-old age group? A toddler may mix their languages within a single sentence. We call it code switching. Understand considerably more than what they can say, and they will also show a stronger expressive output in whichever language they hear or use more frequently. What are some strategies that you can use to support bilingual children? Treat code switching as a sign of developing bilingual competence, not confusion. Don't correct or discourage it. Continue building the receptive vocabulary in both languages if it is at all possible. Or if you are unable to speak the other language, then you do focus on building those new words through real play and learn through play experiences that you provide to the child. Now, both languages or then one language should then be enhanced through rich narration, talk, introduce those new words, and also celebrating expressive attempts by the child in whichever language the word comes out in. What does it look like in the 3 to 5-year-old age group? A child may show a clear expressive preference towards one language, while receptive understanding remains strong in both languages, or occasionally the reverse, with strong home language expression and quieter participation in the setting language, if that is the case. What can you do? What are the strategies that you can use to support bilingual children in your 3 to 5-year-old age group? Distinguish clearly between quiet, because still building expressive confidence in this language, and quiet because of an unrelated concern. Before making any referral or intervention decision, check receptive understanding directly through conversations, through non-expressive language, by using gestures and facial expressions. And something like, can the child follow instruction, point to the items that you are referring to, and respond appropriately before concluding that there's a language concern at all. To summarize, brain architecture is a structure being built by every interaction in our classrooms. Belonging is that felt safety that lets a child actually use the structure that we are creating to take risks and learn within the environment that we create for our children. Bilingualism, properly understood through the receptive and expressive split, reminds us that quiet doesn't mean absent understanding or that a child is not understanding. Watch for all three this week in your classroom and notice especially where a child's receptive language and expressive language might be telling two different stories. Next time on the ECD Dictionary, episode C. See you then.